Marcus did not answer Miriam's text. Not right away. He sat on the floor beside his bed, phone in one hand, gold dust shining in the creases of the other, while morning crawled across the apartment like nothing sacred had happened. The message remained on the screen. Do not go to the third point alone. That should have been enough. A sane man would have gone back to the library. A humble man would have admitted he was out of his depth. A cautious man would have waited for the only living person who seemed to understand what was happening. Marcus was none of those men. Not completely. He stood, walked to the bathroom, and scrubbed his palm under hot water until the skin turned red. The gold did not come off. It had settled into the lines of his hand like fate. He stared at his reflection. He looked exhausted, eyes bruised by lack of sleep, beard rough, hair wild, one side of his face creased from the floor. Not exactly the image of a master alchemist, more like a man who had argued with reality and lost the first round. His phone buzzed again. "Marcus, answer me." He typed back, "Why do we have the same last name?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, because Halden was not the only one who kept records. Come back to the library. Marcus looked toward the kitchen table. The black book sat closed beside the tuning fork. No title, no author, only the gold line down the cover. It had given him a map, the third point, the old condemned building downtown. He knew the place. Everybody who had worked around old city infrastructure knew it. 3 stories of brick, busted windows, sagging roof line, old limestone foundation, and a basement people avoided because the air down there felt wrong. Inspectors called it unsafe. Kids called it haunted. The city called it a nuisance. The black book called it something else. The House of Rot. Marcus texted, "I'll meet you later. I need to check something first." Miriam replied immediately, "No, then, that is how it starts." Then, the line uses urgency as bait. Marcus stared at that one longer, because it was true. The urgency was already inside him. It buzzed beneath his skin. It told him he had to go now, before someone covered the trail, before the door closed, before the courage drained out of him, and he became another man who almost touched the hidden world. He slipped the phone into his pocket. "Then I guess I'm bait," he muttered. He packed carefully salt, quartz, copper coil, iron filings, river water, flashlight, crowbar, notebook, gloves, a cheap respirator mask he had bought for dust and mold. And after standing over it for almost a full minute, the tuning fork, he did not want to take it, which meant he probably needed it. Before leaving, he looked at the black book. "Are you coming?" The apartment was silent. Marcus felt stupid. Then the book's cover opened slightly. Not all the way, just enough. He shut his eyes. "Of course you are." He put it in the backpack. Downtown looked different after what he had seen. The brick buildings, old churches, cracked sidewalks, iron grates, boarded storefronts, and leaning utility poles no longer seemed like random pieces of a tired city. They looked arranged, layered, like one city had been built on top of another, and another beneath that, each one leaving behind its bones. Marcus parked 2 blocks away from the condemned building and walked the rest. The sky had gone the color of dirty pewter. Wind pushed dry leaves along the curb. Somewhere nearby, a loose sign tapped against metal. Tap, 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 a rhythm. Marcus stopped walking. The tapping continued. 3 short, 1 long, 3 short, 1 long. He wrote it down. By itself, it meant nothing. But nothing meant nothing anymore. The House of Rot stood at the corner of a dead street and an alley that smelled of wet cardboard, rust, and old piss. The building had once been beautiful. That made the decay worse. Red brick blackened by time. Tall arched windows boarded with plywood, decorative stonework chipped and stained. A faded sign ghosted across the second floor, too worn to read completely. V. Lee and S. N. Supply. Marcus stepped into the street for a better angle. His mouth went dry. The missing letters filled themselves in his mind. Vale and Sun Supply. "No," he said. The wind moved through the alley. Tap, 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 long tap. His phone buzzed. Miriam. He ignored it. At the front entrance, a city notice had been stapled to the plywood. Dangerous building. Do not enter. Marcus almost laughed. Of all the warnings he had ignored lately, this one was the most official. He went around back. The rear door was half rotten, chained shut, and already pried open at the bottom. Someone had been there before him. Maybe squatters, maybe scrappers, maybe somebody else following a map that should not exist. Marcus crouched and pulled the door just wide enough to slip through. The smell hit first. Mold, wet wood, animal rot, something metallic underneath. The inside of the building was colder than outside. His flashlight beam cut through dust and darkness. Old plaster had fallen from the walls in gray sheets. Ceiling tiles sagged. Wiring hung like dead vines. The floor complained beneath each step. He put on the respirator. His breath sounded loud inside the mask. The first floor had once been a hardware or supply store. Metal shelves remained in crooked rows, mostly empty. A few rusted tools lay scattered near the wall. A cash register sat on the counter, its drawer open like a broken jaw. Marcus walked behind the counter. There, carved into the wood beneath a layer of dust, was the same symbol from the library wall: circle, cross, triangle, but this one had a line through it, a wound through the center. He brushed it clean. Below the symbol were words cut deep into the wood. What rots above feeds below. The floor creaked overhead. Marcus froze. He turned the flashlight toward the ceiling. Dust drifted down. Hello? The building held its breath. Then, from somewhere below, came a sound. Not a voice, not a knock, a tone, low and patient. Behind his heartbeat, the second rhythm answered. Marcus took one step back. The black book shifted inside his backpack. No, he whispered. Not yet. The book shifted again. He pulled it out. The cover was warm. The gold line down the front had widened. It no longer looked like a line. It looked like a crack. Marcus opened it. A map spread across both pages. The building's first floor drew itself in brown ink. Then stairs appeared near the rear wall. The ink moved lower. Basement, sub-basement, a third chamber beneath both. At the bottom of the map, where the foundation should have ended, the book marked a spiral. Beside it were two words, second line. Then a third word appeared beneath them. Descend. Marcus closed the book. Bossy little thing. He found the stairs behind a collapsed partition. They went down into darkness. The first step groaned under his boot. The second held. The third cracked. Marcus grabbed the railing, waited, then kept going. The basement was worse. Water dripped from somewhere. The walls were old limestone, slick with mineral stains. Shelves lined one side, filled with jars whose labels had dissolved long ago. At the far end stood a furnace, huge and black, its iron door hanging open. Marcus shined his light inside. Ash. A lot of ash, not from wood. He knew that without knowing how. The old woman's warning came back. Burn no ash. The furnace exhaled. Marcus stumbled backward. The ash inside stirred as if something beneath it had taken a breath. He turned away and searched the room. There had to be another way down. The book had shown a sub-basement. Behind the furnace, he found a narrow brick arch half hidden by rotted boards. He pried them loose with the crowbar, one by one. Each crack of wood echoed through the basement like a gunshot. Behind the boards was a door. Small, iron, no handle, only a circular depression at the center. Marcus touched it. The gold dust in his palm flared hot. He yanked his hand back, swearing. The door clicked. A seam appeared. He understood then. The gold in his hand was not a stain. It was a key. The door swung inward. Air rolled out of the opening. Dry, warm, ancient. Not basement air. Marcus looked back at the stairs. He should leave. He should call Miriam. He should do anything except enter the impossible warm tunnel beneath a condemned building with a haunted book and a musical key to reality. Instead, he stepped through. The tunnel was not brick, not stone. It was something between the two, smooth, dark, faintly reflective. His flashlight did not bounce off it correctly. The beam seemed to sink into the walls. Symbols covered both sides, some alchemical, some geometric, some older than language, and some were not symbols at all, but equations written in a hand that made Marcus's eyes ache. He walked for what felt like 10 minutes, maybe 30 seconds, maybe an hour. Time lost its manners underground. At last, the tunnel opened into a chamber. Marcus lowered the flashlight. The room was circular, with a floor of black stone and a ceiling lost in darkness. 4 pillars stood around the center. Each pillar held a bowl, one filled with dry ash, one with clear water, one with red earth, one with white feathers. Fire, water, earth, air. At the center of the room was a copper ring set into the floor. Inside the ring, the stone had been carved with the same spiral from the book. The second line. Marcus felt it immediately. The North Ridge had hummed like a distant engine. This place was different. This place pulsed. It was not a crossing. It was a wound, a place where the earth's current had been cut, redirected, forced through the city like blood through a pipe. Marcus stepped closer to the copper ring. The tuning fork vibrated inside his backpack. "No," he said. The vibration grew stronger. "No." The bowls began to stir. The water rippled. The feathers lifted. The earth cracked. The ash rose in a thin gray column. Marcus backed away. Then the chamber filled with light, not bright light, gold light. The copper ring ignited with it. And in that glow, Marcus saw figures standing around the chamber. Not ghosts, memories. Men in coats from another century. Women in dark dresses. Workers with soot on their faces. A child holding a lantern. A younger version of Miriam. An older version of Marcus. And one man in the center, holding the same tuning fork. E. Halden. Marcus knew him at once. Halden struck the fork. The memory shook. The gold light turned black. The workers screamed without sound. The child dropped the lantern. The women covered their ears. Halden fell to his knees. And from the copper ring rose the silhouette, the absence, the shadow. It did not enter the world like a monster. It unfolded like a decision someone should never have made. The memory vanished. Marcus stood alone again, except he was not alone. Across the copper ring, the older Marcus from his dream stood watching him, thinner, hollowed, eyes bright with gold. Marcus could not move. The older man smiled. "You came early." Marcus forced air into his lungs. "What are you?" Older Marcus tilted his head. "You still ask the wrong questions. Are you me? I am what you become when you stop pretending hunger is shameful." Marcus shook his head. "No, you're the thing that followed me." Older Marcus laughed softly. "I am the thing you invited." The chamber pulsed. Marcus felt the gold in his palm burn. What happened here? Older Marcus looked around the chamber with something almost like nostalgia. An experiment, a failure, a door, a birth. History uses different names depending on who survives. Halden opened it. Halden knocked. Older Marcus stepped closer to the ring. "You answered. That's impossible." "Not for long." Marcus clenched his fists. "I'm not you." "Not yet." The tuning fork slid from Marcus's backpack. It hit the stone floor and stood upright, ringing. Marcus had not struck it. The sound pierced the chamber. The bowls ignited into motion. Ash spun, water climbed, earth split. Feathers burned with smokeless blue flame. The copper ring blazed. Older Marcus raised his right hand. Gold dust shone in his palm, too. "Now," he said, "let us make proof." The ash column twisted toward Marcus. The water wrapped around it. The red earth lifted in grains. The burning feathers dissolved into white sparks. All 4 elements spiraled above the copper ring, and at their center something began to form. Small, brilliant, metallic, gold, real gold. Marcus stared. There it was. The dream of every alchemist. The promise that had started the whole damn thing. A bead of gold no larger than a marble, floating in the air, perfect and impossible. His hunger rose so sharply it felt like pain. Older Marcus whispered, "Take it." Marcus reached out. The black book flew open on the floor. Its pages whipped violently until one sentence burned across them in dark red letters. Proof is the hook. Marcus stopped. The gold bead hovered inches from his fingers. He wanted it. God help him. He wanted it. Not because it was beautiful, because it meant he had not wasted his life chasing shadows. It meant the books were real. The maps were real. The humiliation, obsession, hunger, loneliness, all of it had led somewhere. The older Marcus watched with bright, patient eyes. Marcus lowered his hand. No. The chamber went silent. The gold bead dropped. It hit the stone with a tiny sound, not a clink. A heartbeat. Older Marcus's smile faded. Marcus picked up the tuning fork and shoved it into his backpack. I said no. The chamber darkened. Older Marcus stepped backward into the shadow beyond the ring. You think refusal makes you free? Marcus grabbed the black book. I think wanting something doesn't mean it gets to own me. For the first time, the older version of himself looked angry. Good. Marcus turned and ran. Behind him, the chamber cracked open with a sound like a mountain splitting. The tunnel stretched longer on the way out. The walls leaned inward. Symbols crawled in the edge of his vision. The tone behind his heartbeat became a roar. He ran anyway. By the time he burst through the iron door into the basement, his lungs were burning and the respirator hung loose from his face. The furnace door slammed shut by itself. Ash puffed into the air. The building groaned above him. Marcus scrambled up the stairs. On the first floor, the shelves shook. Bricks rained from the ceiling. The old cash register began ringing over and over. Ding, ding, ding. Like a bell, like a warning, like laughter. Marcus made it out the back door just as part of the second floor collapsed behind him. He stumbled into the alley, fell to one knee, and sucked cold air into his lungs. For a moment there was only the city. Trash cans, wet pavement, cloudy sky. A normal world doing a bad job of hiding the impossible one. Then someone spoke behind him. I told you not to go alone. Marcus turned. Miriam stood at the mouth of the alley in a long, dark coat. Silver hair pinned tight, eyes hard with fury and fear. He tried to stand. His legs nearly failed. She came closer, saw his gold-stained palm, then looked past him at the ruined building. You saw him? Marcus nodded. Older me. Miriam's face tightened. No, she said. Marcus frowned. What do you mean, no? Miriam reached into her coat and pulled out a folded photograph, old and cracked at the edges. She handed it to him. Marcus opened it. The photo showed 5 people standing in front of the same building, long before it rotted. E. Halden was there. A younger Miriam stood beside him. 2 others Marcus did not recognize, and at the center stood the older Marcus. Same hollow face, same gold-bright eyes, same thin smile. Marcus felt the world tilt. On the back of the photograph, written in faded ink, was a date, October 17th, 1913. Marcus looked up slowly. Miriam's voice softened, but only slightly. That is not your future, Marcus. The building behind them groaned. From somewhere deep below it, the second line pulsed once. Miriam looked at him with the grief of someone who had waited too long to tell the truth. That is your ancestor. Marcus stared at the photograph. The older man's eyes seemed to shine even through the paper. Miriam stepped closer. And he has been wearing your face.